Welcome back to the deep dive. We are shifting gears a little bit
It was a
today.
big shift.
Yeah, a big one. Usually we take a topic, we strip it down, look at the nuts and bolts of a concept or, a historical event. But today we are looking at something that quite literally requires you to build a world.
That's a great way to put it.
We aren't just talking about keeping fish or having a pet. We're talking about ecosystem engineering. We're talking about managing a living, breathing slice of nature, a whole closed biological loop right inside your living room.
It's a massive shift in perspective, and that shift changes everything about how you view the hobby.
Yeah,
I mean, on the surface, it looks simple.
it does.
You get a glass box, you add water, you add a fish. But when you actually peel back the layers of our source material today, David Alderton's Encyclopedia of Aquarium and Pondfish, you realize you're dealing with evolutionary history, complex water chemistry, fluid dynamics, and biological filtration.
You are effectively the god of a very small, very fragile universe.
You absolutely are, and things can go wrong very, very fast.
That's exactly the mission today. We want to move way past that, that cliche of the sad little goldfish in a bowl.
Oh, yeah.
We want to understand the mechanics of aquatic life. We're talking about organisms that have been refining their biological design for 500 million years, and what it actually takes to keep them alive and thriving when we put them behind glass.
And we're going to use Alderton's Encyclopedia as our roadmap because it really does cover everything. I mean, from the taxonomy of catfish all the way to the specific light spectrums plants need to photosynthesize. It's incredibly comprehensive.
It is, and it's worth noting right off the bat that while we might think of this as a modern hobby, ruled by LED spectrums and app-controlled heaters, canister filters.
All the high-tech gear.
Right. But the human obsession with bringing the river indoors is ancient. It is not a 20th century invention.
Not at all. I was actually surprised by the timeline and the source material. I assume this was a post-industrial thing, maybe Victorian era, at the absolute earliest.
Me too. But the roots go back much, much further.
Well, if you look at just the genetic modification of the goldfish and the selective breeding for color and form, you're looking at Chinese history that dates back over 1,000 years.
1,000 years.
1,000 years. And this wasn't just casual pet keeping. It was a disciplined art form. They were isolating specific traits and managing bloodlines long before we had any modern understanding of genetics.
There's a specific text mentioned in the research, the Book of the Vermilion Fish.
Right, from 1596.
Yeah.
That's one of the oldest surviving essays that's specifically dedicated to the goldfish.
And what's fascinating about a text like that is the level of detail.
Exactly. They weren't just, throwing fish in a pond and hoping for the best. They were cataloging color mutations, establishing care protocols. They were essentially doing genetics work centuries before Gregor Mendel started playing with his peas.
And the Western world was a little bit slower on the uptake, though.
Oh, much slower.
When it finally did arrive in Europe, it wasn't seen as a hobby. It was treated like magic. I found a great reference in the notes from Samuel Pepys' diary.
Oh, the famous diarist.
Yeah, the one who chronicled the Great Fire and the Plague in London.
May 28, 1665, if I recall the date correctly.
That's one. He describes visiting a wealthy acquaintance and seeing fishes kept in a glass of water, and he calls it a fine rarity.
As you would, I suppose.
But the part that made me laugh and also wince a little is his prediction. He writes that they will live so forever.
Which is the ultimate jinx in fish keeping. It's the one thing you never say.
They will live forever. Famous last words. But it really highlights the gap in knowledge back then. They saw the beauty, the novelty, but they didn't understand the biology at all. It was just a status symbol.
A very dangerous status symbol, specifically when we jump forward to the Victorian era. That's when the word aquarium was actually coined, and the first public aquarium opened at the London Zoo in 1853. But the home technology was terrifying. The source mentions that these early tropical aquariums had slate bases, and they were heated from beneath using naked flames.
I can't even picture that. So you have a glass box full of heavy water sitting on a slate slab with a literal fire burning underneath it inside your parlor.
It was a recipe for absolute disaster. I mean, thermal shock could crack the slate or the glass, dumping gallons of water onto the fire, or the flame could just, simply overheat the water and boil the fish.
So it was ecosystem engineering in the most perilous sense of the word.
Truly. It's amazing any fish survived that period.
Thankfully, we have moved past candles and open flames, but the core drive, I think, remains the same. Why do we do this? Why do we spend thousands of dollars and countless hours of maintenance on creatures we can't touch, can't walk, and can't cuddle?
The text touches on the why quite effectively, and it argues that in a world where our leisure time is shrinking and our digital stress is just skyrocketing, the aquarium offers a measurable physiological reset.
It's that concept of blue mind, isn't it? The idea that just being near water changes our brain chemistry.
Essentially, yes. There are studies that have shown that looking at a well-maintained ecosystem literally lowers blood pressure and reduces cortisol levels. It lets you reconnect with the natural world, but in a controlled, intimate way.
You're observing a timeline of life that is totally separate from your deadline at work.
Exactly. It forces you to slow down because the rhythm of an aquarium is slow. Things happen gradually. It's a form of mindfulness, really.
So before we can build this world for them, though, we have to understand the inhabitants, and I want to get granular here. The question, what is a fish, sounds incredibly simple.
Almost stupidly simple.
Right, but biologically, it's surprisingly messy.
Oh, fish is actually a bit of a garbage bin term in taxonomy. It's a catch-all. If you just say it lives in water and breathes, well, you include whales and crustaceans.
Okay, so that's too broad.
Way too broad. If you say it has fins, well, some amphibians have fin-like structures. And here's the real mind-bender. If you look at the evolutionary tree, a lungfish is actually more closely related to a cow than it is to a salmon.
Wait, say that again. A cow?
Yes, a cow. Because of how the lineage of the lobe-fin fish diverged to become tetrapods, which are, land animals, so that branch is closer to us and cows than it is to the ray-fin fish like salmon.
That completely rewires my brain. Okay, so for the sake of the hobby and the encyclopedia, we use a core definition.
We have to. So for our purposes, we're looking at vertebrates animals with a backbone. They are ectothermic, which is the scientific term for cold-blooded, meaning they rely on the environment to regulate their body temperature.
Right.
They possess gills for gas exchange in water, and they are typically covered in scales. That's our working definition.
And they are old. We mentioned 500 million years earlier.
That's the scale we're dealing with. It's immense. The first fish were jawless, scaleless, and boneless. They had skeletons made of cartilage, like a shark.
And that lineage actually split, right? Which gives us our two main categories today.
That's the big division. You have the chondrichthyes.
Sharks and rays.
Exactly. They kept that cartilage skeleton. And then you have the octodichthyes, the bony fish. That's 95% of all fish, and it includes almost everything we would ever keep in an aquarium, from the tiniest neon tetra to a giant Oscar.
Okay, so let's look at the anatomy of that 95%. I want to talk about scales because I think most people, myself included, just view them as skin. But the growth mechanism described in the book is so counterintuitive.
It is. You would assume that as a fish gets bigger, it grows more scales, right?
Yeah, like adding bricks to a wall.
But it doesn't. A fish is born with a set number of scales. As the fish grows, the scales just get larger in diameter. They grow from the center out.
So a baby goldfish has the same scale count as a giant pond koi that's 2 feet long.
Precisely. And you can actually age a fish by looking at the rings on a single scale under a microscope, very similar to tree rings. The rings are closer together for periods of slow growth, like winter.
That's amazing. But their function is what really matters here. They aren't just armor plating.
No, not at all. They are coated in a mucus layer, the slime coat.
Which is why the cardinal rule of fish keeping is wet your hands before you touch a fish.
That's it. If you touch a fish with dry hands, you strip that slime. That slime contains antibodies, enzymes. It's a protective barrier against parasites. If you wipe it off, you're leaving the fish completely open to infection. And it helps with movement too, right? Oh, massively. It reduces friction, allowing them to move through the water more efficiently. It's a multi-purpose defense and performance system.
Speaking of movement, the text breaks down fin structures in a way that helps you predict a fish's entire lifestyle just by looking at it. This is basically physics.
Functional morphology, yeah. Take the caudal fin, the tail. If you see a fish with a deeply forked tail, like a donio or, a tuna in the ocean, that is a design for sustained speed and efficiency.
Why the fork?
The fork reduces drag. It allows the fish to cruise for miles and miles without tiring. It's built for open water.
Versus a rounded tail, like you see on a betta or some of those ambush predators.
A rounded tail acts like a massive paddle.
Yeah.
It grabs a huge volume of water all at once. That creates a massive burst of acceleration, perfect for lunging at prey from a standstill. But it's terrible for long-distance swimming. It creates way too much drag.
So the forked tail is the marathon runner, and the rounded tail is the drag racer.
Perfect analogy. And then you have the ventral or pelvic fins. Usually these are just stabilizers, like the keel on a boat. But biology loves to repurpose tools. The book mentions the corridors catfish.
Oh, this was wild.
The corridors is amazing. The female actually uses her ventral fins to form a little basket. During spawning, she lays an egg into this little fin purse she makes, holds it there, swims over to a leaf or the side of the glass, and carefully sticks it on.
That's a level of dexterity I just wouldn't expect from a fin.
It's incredible to watch. Evolution is just so resourceful. Even the seemingly useless fins have a story. I wanted to ask about the adipose fin, that tiny little tab of flesh you see on the back of tetras and salmon between the dorsal fin and the tail. For decades, scientists just thought it was vestigial.
Right, just leftover evolutionary baggage that didn't do anything.
That was the theory. But the text notes it's actually a fatty tissue store, a little energy reserve. And even more recent research suggests it might be packed with sensory neurons to detect water flow and turbulence.
So evolution rarely keeps things around for millions of years if they don't do something.
It's just not efficient. There's almost always a purpose, even if we haven't figured it out yet.
Let's shift to the engine of the fish. Respiration. We all know gills take oxygen out of water, but the efficiency stats in the book are just mind-blowing.
It's an engineering marvel, truly. Water is dense and holds very, very little oxygen compared to air. So fish have to be incredibly good at extraction. Their gills can pull up to 80% of the dissolved oxygen out of the water that passes over them.
80%. Compare that to human lungs.
We're terrible at it. We only extract about 25% of the oxygen from the air we breathe. The rest we just exhale.
So how do they do it?
They achieve that efficiency through something called countercurrent exchange. The blood in the gill filaments flows in the opposite direction to the water flowing over them,
Okay, why is that important?
because it maintains a steep concentration gradient along the entire length of the gill. The water is always more oxygen-rich than the blood it's next to, so oxygen is always diffusing into the blood. It's brilliantly efficient.
And the surface area helps too, I imagine.
Immensely. If you were to flatten out all the tiny lamellae in the gills, the total surface area can be 10 times the surface area of the fish's entire outer body. It's a massive organ packed into a tiny slit.
But not all fish play by these rules. The text spent some good time on the anabantoids, the labyrinth fish.
These are the great rule breakers, your grammas and your betas. They evolved in Southeast Asia in hot, stagnant, muddy puddles or rice paddies.
So low oxygen environments.
Near zero oxygen environments. In those conditions, the water is so warm and still that even the best gills in the world wouldn't work. They're just not enough to extract.
So they hacked the system.
They developed the labyrinth organ. It's a highly vascularized chamber, like a maze of tissues, located just above the gills. It acts like a primitive lung. They swim to the surface, they gulp air, and they extract oxygen directly from the atmosphere.
Which is why you see betas surviving in those tiny cups in pet stores.
Yes, although I must emphasize that it is absolutely not a suitable long-term home. But they survive because they don't rely solely on the water for their breath. It's a survival adaptation, not a lifestyle choice.
Right. Now, beyond just breathing and swimming, the way fish perceive the world is basically sci-fi. We have 5 senses, they have more.
They have a sixth sense that we can barely even imagine. The lateral line. If you look closely at the side of a fish, you'll often see a faint line of pores running from the gill plate all the way to the tail.
I always thought that was just a color pattern, or maybe where the muscles join.
It's a dedicated sensory organ. It's a canal that runs just under the scales, and it's filled with fluid and tiny hair cells called neuromasts, which are very similar to the mechanism in our own inner ear.
And what does it do?
It detects pressure waves and low-frequency vibrations in the water.
The text calls it remote touch.
That's the perfect description for it. Think about it. If a predator is coming up behind a fish, that predator pushes a pressure wave of water ahead of it. The fish feels that wave hitting its lateral line long before the predator even gets close.
It's an early warning system.
A perfect one. It's also how a school of fish can turn and move in perfect, instantaneous unison. They aren't looking at each other. They're feeling the minute pressure changes created by their neighbors.
And then you have the electric fish. And we aren't just talking about the lethal shocks from an electric eel.
No, not at all. We're talking about weak electrical fields used for navigation and communication. The mormyrids, like the elephant nose fish, are the classic example. They live in murky, muddy rivers in Africa where eyesight is almost useless.
So they generate a weak electrical field around their body.
Like a personal force field, yeah. It comes from a specialized organ in their tail.
And they can sense changes in it.
Exactly. If a rock or a piece of wood or a worm or another fish enters that field, it distorts the electricity. The elephant-nosed fish has thousands of specialized receptors on its skin that can sense that distortion with pinpoint accuracy. It's biological radar.
So they can navigate complicated obstacles in pitch darkness.
Pitch darkness. And they even use it to communicate. They can send out little electrical pulses, like Morse code, to signal aggression or mating interest to other electric fish.
So we have this highly complex, ancient, sensory, supercharged organism now. We have to build a box for it to live in. Which brings us to part 2, the science of the tank.
This is where the ecosystem engineering really starts. And it begins with the most basic hardware.
Glass versus acrylic, the eternal debate in the hobby.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's a trade-off. There's no single right answer. Glass is the traditionalist's choice. It's rigid, it's highly scratch-resistant, and it stays perfectly clear for decades.
But it's heavy, and it can crack or shatter.
Very heavy. And the silicone seams are a potential point of failure over time. Acrylic, on the other hand, is the modern contender. It's much lighter, it's much stronger than glass, less likely to shatter, and crucially, it's a better thermal insulator.
So an acrylic tank actually costs less to heat.
Yes, it holds the water temperature more stably, it's more energy efficient, but, and this is a big but, if you even look at it wrong, it scratches. You can't use a standard algae scrubbing pad on acrylic. You need special acrylic-safe tools, and you have to be incredibly gentle.
And regardless of the material, you have to respect the physics of water. The weight calculations in the book are pretty sobering.
People always underestimate this. Water weighs about 8.3 pounds per gallon, a standard 20-gallon tank, which really isn't even that big. Once you add the weight of the gravel, the glass itself, the decor, you're looking at around 285 pounds.
You don't put 285 pounds on a cheap particle board bookshelf from IKEA.
Not if you value your security deposit, no. You need a stand specifically designed to transfer that load vertically to the floor. And if you're getting into the really big tanks, 100 gallons or more, you need to be thinking about where your floor joists are.
Okay, so we have the tank. It's on a solid stand. We fill it with water. Now we come to the single most important concept in the entire hobby. If you are listening to this and you plan to keep fish, this is the part you absolutely cannot skip.
This is it, the nitrogen cycle.
This is what separates success from failure.
This is the filter that weeds out the casual owners from the dedicated ones.
Yeah.
Most beginners fail right here. They set up a tank, they add the fish immediately, and a week later, the water is cloudy and all the fish are dead. They call it new tank syndrome, but what it really is ammonia poisoning.
So let's unpack this cycle step by step. It all starts with waste.
Right. Fish eat and fish excrete waste. That waste, along with any uneaten food and rotting plant matter, breaks down and releases ammonia into the water.
And ammonia is bad.
Ammonia is highly toxic. In a river or a lake, the sheer volume of water and the current washes it away, diluting it to nothing. In your glass box, it accumulates fast. It literally burns the fish's gills, causes organ failure, and suffocates them.
So we need a way to process it. And this is where the filter comes in, but not in the way most people think.
Exactly. We rely on invisible livestock, beneficial bacteria. A species called Nitrosomonas bacteria will naturally colonize your filter media, the sponge, the ceramic rings, whatever's in there. They are your first line of defense. They eat the ammonia.
They consume it as their food source.
And as a byproduct of their metabolism, they convert it into nitrites.
But wait, the book says nitrates are also extremely toxic.
Correct. You solved one problem and created another. Nitrites are dangerous because they bind to the fish's hemoglobin and prevent it from carrying oxygen. It's the Fey equivalent of carbon monoxide poisoning. They suffocate even in oxygen-rich water.
So we need a second wave of help.
We need a second wave of bacteria. This time, it's a species called Nitrobacter. They move in after the first colony is established, and they eat the nitrites. They convert the nitrites into their final byproduct, which is nitrates.
And nitrates are safe.
Nitrates are relatively safe, yes. They're only toxic at very high concentrations. In low to moderate amounts, they are basically just plant fertilizer.
And we get them out of the tank how?
2 ways. The primary way is through partial water changes, physically removing a percentage of the old nitrate-rich water and replacing it with fresh, clean water. The other way is by having lots of live plants in the aquarium, which will absorb the nitrates directly as food.
So the cycle isn't about the water circulating. It's about growing these 2 different bacterial colonies in sequence.
That is the whole game. That is what cycling a tank means. It means setting it up and letting it run for weeks with a source of ammonia before you add fish to allow these colonies to grow.
And that's why the filter's main job isn't what people think.
Right. We think of it as a mechanical sieve to catch poop, but its most important job by far is providing a high surface area luxury condo for these bacteria to live on. That's why you should never, ever wash your filter media in tap water.
Because of the chlorine in our drinking water.
Exactly. Chlorine is put in our tap water specifically to kill bacteria. If you rinse your filter sponge under the tap, you will kill your entire biological filter. You'll crash the cycle, and you'll be right back to square one with toxic ammonia building up in the tank.
That's such a crucial tip. When you do maintenance, clean your filter media in a bucket of the old tank water you just siphoned out.
Swish it around in there, get the gunk off, but preserve the bacteria. The text also divides filtration into 3 distinct pillars: mechanical, biological, and chemical.
Mechanical is the obvious one.
That's the sponge or filter floss, the physical barrier that catches the floating solids, the poop, and the uneaten food.
Biological is what we just talked about.
That's the home for the bacteria. It's usually things like porous ceramic rings or lava rock, anything with a huge surface area for colonization.
And then there's chemical. This is usually activated carbon.
Right. Carbon is interesting because it's a master absorber. It works through adsorption, pulling molecules out of the water.
What kind of molecules?
It acts like a molecular sponge. It pulls dissolved organic compounds, tannins that stain the water yellow, odors, even some heavy metals out of the water, making it look crystal clear.
But there's a catch.
There's a big catch. It doesn't discriminate. If you are dosing medication into your tank to treat a sick fish, the activated carbon will suck the medicine right out of the water just as effectively as it sucks out everything else.
So you're effectively filtering out the cure you just paid for.
You are. So the rule is you must remove the carbon from your filter before you start any medication regimen.
Let's move to the water itself. Because the chemistry class isn't over yet, we have to talk about pH and hardness.
This goes right back to where the fish evolved. Geography dictates chemistry. That's the key takeaway.
So the Amazon River versus the African Rift Lakes.
The perfect contrast. The Amazon and its tributaries are basically weak tea. The water flows over sand and through immense amounts of rotting leaves, wood, and organic matter. This releases tannins and acids. The water becomes very soft, meaning it has very few dissolved minerals, and it's acidic with a low pH.
And fish like discus, neon tetras, and angelfish evolved in this soup.
Their entire physiology, their kidneys, and their process of osmoregulation is tuned specifically for that soft, acidic water.
Now, contrast that with the Great Rift Lakes in Africa, Lake Malawi and Lake Tanganyika.
Totally different world. Those lakes were formed by tectonic rifts. The water flows over massive deposits of magnesium limestone. It is incredibly hard, full of dissolved minerals, and highly alkaline. With a high pH, it's almost liquid rock. The cichlids there evolved to thrive in it.
So what happens if you take a discus from the acidic Amazon and you drop it into that hard, alkaline Rift Lake water?
It suffers massive physiological stress. It can't regulate its internal salt and mineral balance. Its kidneys go into overdrive. It's a recipe for disease and death. This is why your substrate choice matters so much.
Right, because you mentioned limestone. If you put limestone-based gravel in a soft water tank for your discus,
the limestone will slowly dissolve, continuously leaching minerals into the water. It will harden the water and raise the pH. You will be fighting your own chemistry every single day.
The book suggests the simple vinegar test for any rocks or gravel you find.
It's basic geology and a lifesaver. Put a few drops of vinegar on a rock or a piece of gravel. If it fizzes or bubbles, it contains calcium carbonate. It's limestone or something similar. Do not put it in a soft water tank.
One last hardware note before we finally get to stock the tank. Heating and lighting.
Heating is pretty standard for tropicals. A submersible heater with a thermostat.
Oy.
But there was a specific warning in the text regarding piranhas that I absolutely loved.
Oh yeah, the don't get electrocuted warning.
Piranhas are curious. And they have jaws that are designed to shear through flesh and bone. They are notorious for biting through the electrical cords of the submersible heaters that are inside the tank with them.
Which creates a very spicy, electrified soup.
Incredibly dangerous for both the fish and the owner who puts their hands in the water. So for piranhas and other large, aggressive fish, you need to use external heating systems that are integrated into the filter lines, or under-gravel heating cables that are buried safely out of reach.
It's a great reminder that you are keeping wild animals, not just decorations.
Always.
Speaking of wild animals, let's move to part 3. The inhabitants. The book makes a really big deal about using scientific names. It feels a bit academic at first, but there's a very practical reason for it, isn't there?
It's all about precision. Common names are a complete disaster. The name blue perch could mean 5 different fish depending on which country you're in or even which part of the country. It's chaos.
Whereas a scientific name is universal.
Exactly. If I say beta splendens, every single biologist and serious hobbyist in the world knows exactly what fish I'm talking about. It prevents you from buying a fish that you think is a 3-inch tetra, but is actually a juvenile that grows to be 3 feet long.
And then there's the L number system. This was totally new to me. It sounds like a secret code for fish nerds.
It kind of is. It's a solution to a very unique problem with catfish. The Amazon is so vast and so biodiverse that in the 80s and 90s, hobbyists and collectors were discovering new species of plecos, the sucker-mouthed catfish, faster than scientists could formally describe and name them.
So the scientific taxonomy couldn't keep up with the market.
It couldn't even come close. So a German aquarium magazine, .z, started assigning them L numbers. The L stands for the family name, Loricariidae. L046 is the famous zebra pleco. L090 is the Papa Pennaque. It was meant to be a temporary placeholder system, but it just stuck.
It just highlights how much discovery is still happening. We haven't even named everything in the river yet.
We are still just scratching the surface. But when it comes to seeing evolution in action, nothing in the freshwater world beats the cichlids of Lake Malawi.
This is the classic textbook example, isn't it? The Darwin's finches of the fish world.
On steroids. Lake Malawi formed about 2 million years ago. A handful of ancestral riverine cichlid species entered the lake. Today, there are over 1,600 distinct species found there, and nowhere else on Earth.
How does that happen so fast? I mean, 2 million years is a blink of an eye in geological time.
It's a process called adaptive radiation. To avoid competing for the same food and resources, they split off to colonize every conceivable niche. Some evolved specialized teeth to eat algae off rocks. Others evolved to sift through the sand for invertebrates. Some evolved to eat the scales right off the sides of other fish.
Wow.
There's even one that evolved to play dead to lure in smaller fish. And as they specialized, they developed incredible color variations to attract mates within their own niche.
The polymorphism is just wild.
It is. You can have a species like Maylandia zebra, where the males are a brilliant electric blue and black, but the females in the same species might be a blotched orange and black. It's a riot of evolutionary creativity happening in real time.
And with all that diversity comes incredibly complex behavior. We tend to think of fish as having the personality of a carrot, but the social politics in a cichlid tank are intense.
It is a soap opera. A beautiful, violent soap opera. Take the firemouth cichlid. It's territorial, but it's not actually a stone-cold killer. It prefers to bluff.
It's the hold me back guy at the bar.
That's a perfect description. It has a bright red throat pouch. When threatened, it flares its gills out to make its head look double the normal size, and it flashes that brilliant red color. It's a threat display signaling, look how big and crazy I am. It would be too costly for you to fight me.
And usually that works.
Usually, unless it runs into something like a Jack Dempsey.
Named after the heavyweight boxing champion.
And for good reason. They're famously pugnacious. They don't bluff as much, they just hit.
But it's not just violence and aggression. The parenting behaviors described in the book completely debunk the dumb fish myth.
The level of parental care is staggering. Let's start with the mouth brooders.
This is one of the weirdest and most amazing things in all of nature.
It is. With many African cichlids, the female lays her eggs and then immediately scoops them all up into her mouth. She holds them in her buccal cavity for weeks, tumbling them to keep them clean until they hatch. She doesn't eat for the entire period. She is a living, starving incubator.
And even after they hatch and become free-swimming fry,
If danger approaches, she gives a little signal, opens her mouth, and the entire cloud of babies swims right back inside for safety. It's a level of dedication that is just awe-inspiring.
and then you have the discus, which are basically aquatic mammals.
In a way, yes. This is another mind-blower. Discus parents secrete a specialized nutrient-dense mucus from their skin. The newly hatched fry don't hunt for food. They swarm the parents and graze on this slime coat. They are literally drinking milk from their parents' skin.
It's a little gross, but incredibly effective.
It ensures the babies get pristine, high-protein nutrition in a competitive environment where tiny live foods might be scarce.
And then on the purely defensive side, we have things like the pufferfish. Everyone knows they blow up.
Inflation is a great trick. It makes you too big and spiky to swallow. But I actually prefer the more subtle defenses, like the use of false eye spots.
The ocelli.
Right. You see this on the Oscar cichlid and many marine butterfly fish. They have a big, dark spot, often with a ring around it, located on their tail. It perfectly mimics a giant eye.
So the idea is that a predator attacks the tail thinking it's the head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Evolutionarily speaking, it is much, much better to lose a chunk of your tail fin than to get your head bitten off. The tail grows back, The head does not. It gives the fish a split second to escape in the wrong direction, confusing the predator.
Let's round out this whole ecosystem with part 4, the greenery. We've talked about the fish, the water, the bacteria, but the plants are the lungs and the kidneys of the operation.
They are functional equipment, not just decoration. During the day, they perform photosynthesis, consuming the CO2 the fish exhale and releasing oxygen for them to breathe. But just as importantly for the health of the tank, they suck up nitrates. They are the final stage of that nitrogen cycle we talked about.
The text categorizes them by how they grow. Floating plants like salvinia or duckweed seem particularly useful for a new tank.
They're excellent for beginners. Because they're floating at the surface, they have access to unlimited CO2 from the air, so they can grow incredibly fast and suck up waste and nitrates very rapidly. Plus, their hanging roots provide a perfect nursery for baby fish to hide in.
Then you have the substrate plants, the ones rooted in the gravel, and some of them have these very strange life cycles. The tubers, for instance.
Like the Aponogeton plants, the so-called betta bulbs you see. They grow from a tuber or a bulb. In the wild, they often experience a dry or a cold season where the water recedes. So in the aquarium, after a few months of vigorous growth, it might drop all its leaves and look completely dead.
And most people would panic and throw it out.
Which is a huge mistake. The text advises that you should actually take the tuber out and store it in cool, damp sand around 50 degrees Fahrenheit for about 2 months. It's mimicking its natural winter dormancy period. When you put it back in the warm tank, it explodes with new growth.
You have to understand the natural rhythm of the plant, not just the fish.
Absolutely. Now, we do have to address the controversial topic.
Oh, plastic plants.
The purists hate them.
They do. And biologically, they do absolutely nothing. They don't produce oxygen, they don't consume nitrates, they don't clean the water. But they also don't die.
And some fish are just absolute bulldozers.
If you keep large cichlids or silver dollars or even some large plecos, they will shred, uproot, and eat any real plant you put in there within an hour. For those kinds of tanks, high-quality plastic or silk plants are sometimes the only way to have any green at all.
And they still serve a purpose, right?
A behavioral one, yes. They provide visual barriers to break up lines of sight between territorial fish, which significantly reduces aggression. Let's talk about hardscape, the wood and the rock. The term bogwood comes up a lot.
This is wood that has been preserved for hundreds or thousands of years in peat bogs. It's very dense, so it sinks naturally without needing to be weighed down. But its defining characteristic is that it releases tannins into the water.
Which is what turns the water brown.
Exactly. We call it a black water look. It looks like steeped tea. And while some people think it looks dirty, fish from the Amazon or parts of Asia absolutely love it. The tannins are mild antiseptics, and they naturally lower the pH, making the water softer and more acidic. It makes the fish feel at home.
We've built the tank, we've stocked it, and we've planted it. As we start to wrap this up, I want to zoom out to the ethics of the hobby. Because taking fish from the wild is and should be a contentious issue.
It is, and it absolutely should be scrutinized. The stories of cyanide fishing on coral reefs to stun fish for the trade are horrific and destroy the entire habitat. But the text offers a very interesting counterargument, specifically for sustainable freshwater collection.
This is the economic incentive argument.
Right. Imagine you are a person living in a small community in the Amazon rainforest. Your economic options are limited. You can either chop down the trees for timber and charcoal, clear the land for cattle ranching, or you can catch cardinal tetras sustainably for the aquarium trade.
If the fish in the river have monetary value, then the river itself has value.
Exactly. The aquarium trade, when it's done right and managed sustainably, can give the local population a direct financial reason to protect the ecosystem rather than destroy it. It effectively monetizes the health of the forest and the river.
Though it's worth noting, as the book points out, that the vast majority of common freshwater fish, your goldfish, your guppies, barbs, most tetras, are commercially farm-raised now.
Oh, yes. There are huge aquaculture operations in Florida and Southeast Asia that supply most of the global market. It's mostly the saltwater side of the hobby and some of the rarer, more specialized freshwater species that are still heavily reliant on wild collection.
So we have traveled from the vermilion fish of ancient China to the nitrogen-cycling, high-tech glass boxes of today. We've looked at the physics of dissolved oxygen and the incredible parenting skills of the cichlid.
It really does recontextualize the entire hobby. You aren't just keeping a pet in the same way you keep a hamster. You are actively maintaining a complex life support system. You are the weather, you are the sun, and you are the river current, all in one.
And I want to leave the listener with one final thought that the text sparked for me. We talked about fish senses, all their superpowers. The book mentions the four-eyed fish, which has eyes split horizontally so it can see above and below the water simultaneously. But even your average Oscar has excellent eyesight.
They do. They have very good color vision, and they absolutely recognize faces. They know who the person that feeds them is.
So when you are sitting there on your couch, staring into your lighted glass box, watching these creatures from a lineage 500 million years removed from yours, just remember that they are watching you back.
And they are probably judging your algae scraping skills.
Almost certainly. But there's a genuine connection that can form there. You're looking through that glass, bridging the gap between air and water, and connecting with a completely different branch of the tree of life. It's a real privilege.
It really is.
Thanks for taking the plunge with us today. Keep those filters running.
Until next time.
This has been The Deep Dive. We'll see you on the next one.